Today we are going to be discussing about the budget. Whether it is a state budget or a central government budget, it's a major public policy document. In this context, we are going to be discussing the Telangana state budget, which was presented recently. The budgets must reflect hopes, aspirations, ambitions of the people. I think in that kind of a scenario, we need to look at the context of Telangana. The Telangana state has not been created in isolation. It has been primarily created because Telangana is a very backward region. And the population of Telangana, when we look at the profile, the demographic profile of the people of the Telangana state is altogether different from the 27 states which we have in this country. Here, the 93% of the population are the marginalized sections. If you take the scheduled caste population in Telangana is about little over 15%. The tribal population is closer to about 8%. And the backward class population is about 52%. And the minority population, the Muslims population in the Telangana state is closer to about 15%. When you take all this population into consideration, it's about 93% of the population. And budget has to reflect these concerns of the population of the state. In other words, it should reflect, as I've said, it's a public policy document. It should be people-oriented, and it should take the concerns and the issues of the backward region of Telangana. Let us look at specifically what this budget highlights. It's almost about 3 lakh crores outlay. To be very precise, 2,91,000 crores outlay. And the budget says, in terms of their emphasis is welfare. The budget says again, the emphasis is on infrastructure. Let me look at, more specifically later, I'm talking about the thrust of the budget as been reflected in the Telangana Assembly by Mr. Harish Rao, who is the finance minister. He said, the budget is for welfare, for infrastructure. And he said, the budget is focusing on Raitu Bandhu, on Raitu Bima, power subsidy, rice subsidy, crop loan waiver, and housing scheme. And also it talks about, agriculture. That is the emphasis. But now let us look at, the allocations. Whether these allocations, have been reflected the way the budget, wanted to talk about. And we must also look at how did the TRS government, now which is BRS, has come to power in Telangana state. One of the major promises they made was KG to PG free education. Let me look at, little later, the allocation which has been given. First I want to highlight, what are their promises. The second major promise is the 2-bedroom house for the people of the state who is not having housing. And then they have talked about 3-acre land. And then several times in the assembly it was promised that recruitment of 2 lakh jobs will take place. And another major promise they made is unemployment allowance and revival of the rural economy. Education is a major promise they were made. Administrative reforms, they made another promise, and industrialization of development. These are the issues which they have highlighted in their manifesto. Let me look at each of them very, very minutely so that we can analyze it better. As I've said, in terms of the profile of the population, 52% of the population in the backward class. The 52% of the population in the backward classes. The allocation which has been given to the backward classes development, backward classes welfare is only 6,229 crores out of the total budget, which does not even work out to about 2% of the allocation. And then when you look at, the budget nowhere, talks about, SC/ST sub-plan. SC/ST population, as I've said, is almost closer to 25% of the population. One of the major developments that took place in Telangana was a major, movement took place for creation of a SC/ST sub-plan. The budget nowhere talks about, what is the SC/ST sub-plan, how much has been given, what was the allocation for the last, 5 years of the SC/ST sub-plan. Is there any money, available in the SC/ST sub-plan? What does the SC/ST sub-plan say? If the money which has been allocated is not utilized, will continue to be utilized, the next financial year. The budget doesn't talk about that SC/ST sub-plan. The budget does not refer anywhere, is there SC/ST sub-plan there? How much has been spent for SC welfare? How much has been spent for tribal welfare, which is a very significant population? Let me look at another major issue. In terms of budget has to reflect, there are three important sectors which are important: education, health and rural economy. Let me look at the allocation which has been given for health. The health allocation budget is just 4.18%. Health sector is a major sector. Primary health sectors are not working in Telangana. And in major hospitals, we hear, such as Gandhi Hospital and Usmania Hospital, and then hospital in Warangal, we have been hearing reports. In the last 2 months, at least about 10 women have died, after having a small family planning operation or surgery. And we have been hearing reports saying that rodents and then cats and then all kinds of animals are entering into hospitals in Kakatiya, in Warangal, which is one of the major hospitals there. The allocation is just 4.18%. Health sector is one of the major sectors. And all along, the government has been saying, we are going to be centering in the, health sector. We will establish more primary health hospitals. In fact, one of the major promises which they made was, every district will have a hospital like a corporate hospital. Forget about making like a corporate hospital. Infrastructure is not there. Equipment is not there. About some time ago in Sarojini Devi Hospital, about a couple of years ago, a surgery was done, and then 11 of them have lost their eyesight. People are complaining, when they go to major government hospitals, they do not have doctors, they do not have paramedical staff, and the allocation is just about 4.18, which is totally inadequate for a backward region like Telangana, where people have several kinds of health concerns. And then let me look at another major scheme which the government has been promising all along, is about fee reimbursement. What is the allocation for the fee reimbursement? 5,609 crores has been allocated for fee reimbursement. And according to the data we have, fee reimbursement and scholarship, already 4,000 crores are pending. In terms of fee reimbursement and scholarship, which has to be given last year, for the last couple of years, 4,000 crores are pending. The allocation is 5,609 crores. Then what will happen to the earlier fee reimbursement? Several college students going to engineering colleges and other colleges have been complaining, we are not getting our certificates. We are not in a position to complete our education. Government has not been reimbursing, etc. So that is another. How is that the budget does not talk about? What about the arrears of 4,000 crores? You were allocated only 5,609 crores, which is again not very adequate, because education is very, very important. This government has been talking about KG to PG free education. Forget about providing free education. At least students are going to private colleges and government colleges where they are supposed to be getting their reimbursement, they are not getting. 4,000 crores is pending, and the budget allocates only 5,609 crores. When you look at another major sector, higher education, the allocation for higher education is 3,001 crores. Entire higher education. Higher education would mean there are about 15 universities in the state. There are the agriculture universities, there are the medical universities, then there is big universities, it's like Usmania University, Kakatiya University, and several small universities are there. Their allocation This includes salaries. According to me, out of the 3,001 crore, the allocation, this goes, 80% of it will go only for payments of salaries for teachers and NGOs. What about infrastructure? What about new hostels? What about new buildings? What about modernization of labs? Education is very, very important. 30% of the population of Telangana is below 25. All of them need to go to quality schools, quality colleges and quality universities, and then it does not allocation is very, very meager. When you are talking about 3,100 crores, allocation is just about less than 6% of the allocation. That includes infrastructure, payment of salaries, development, everything which is included. Another major promise this government made was unemployment allowance. It is there in the manifesto. What about the allocation for the unemployment allowance? How much allowance are you going to be giving? Does the government have the data in terms of unemployment allowance? Why they have not reflected this unemployment allowance in the budget? Every year they have been saying, we are going to be giving. That was a major promise, when the government came, when they came for election last time in the manifesto, we will give unemployment allowance. The budget doesn't talk about unemployment allowance. So when we look at, the key sectors like health is only 4.18%. Education is just about 6%. Power sector, the government talks about every day we are giving 24 hours power. And several reports are coming now, in several villages, power is not there for 24 hours. Allocation which has been given for power is just 4.3. How are you going to be giving free power? Government is talking about quality power, 24 hours uninterrupted power supply they will give. Let me get back again, the government has been talking about strengthening of English medium schools. Now, they have made, English medium compulsory. And then, what is the allocation? Where are you going to be training these teachers who are teaching, English medium? What is the specific allocation? How much are you going to be spending for the training program? The budget is not very clear about it. And let me take, another important dimension. The poorest of the poor, the marginalized sections, go to residential schools. There are 1,002 residential schools in Telangana. Out of these 1,200 residential schools, 80% of them do not have pakka building. They don't have buildings of their own. They're all working from, private accommodation and rented accommodation. There are 6 lakh students, studying in residential schools. When you're talking about, modernization, when you're talking about improving the quality of higher education, which the budget talks about it, what is the allocation for residential schools? 1,002 residential schools are there. What about, how are we going to be recruiting? What kind of infrastructure are we going to be providing? Are you going to be having, computer labs? Are we going to be having science labs for them? Because in several of the residential schools, physics is there, chemistry is there, botany is there, zoology is there. They should all compete for higher education. To compete in higher education, they need to have that allocation. And the other important dimension we need to talk about, after all, what is the purpose of the budget? It has to improve the people's lives, quality of their life. What are the issues of Telangana state? 30% of the population in Telangana is below the poverty line. Poverty, unemployment, equality of women, gender justice, providing, girl education. The budget nowhere, talks about, providing quality education to girls. According to the data, we have almost 20% of the girls below 15 are not going to schools. According to the data, we have 70% of the girls are dropping out from schools. 70% of them are dropping out before they complete 10th class because there are no toilets, there are no bathrooms, there is no water. And the budget doesn't talk about it. It has to improve the lives of the people, particularly the children. All of them should go to good schools. And then another thing, this government has been talking about skill development. What is the allocation for skill development? What does skill development mean? Establishing more polytechnics, establishing more vocational colleges, establishing more ITIs, industrial training. All of them do not have to come to only to universities. Skill development, this is what is required. More polytechnics are required. More ITIs are required. More vocational training is required. Vocational training is required, but below. Now, then, when we talk about budget, it's very, very important point, I want to talk about budget allocation and actuals. The budget does not talk about it. Actual. In fact, one of the major problems have been with the government for the last 9 years have been whatever has been allocated in the budget is not released. The state government has been functioning in a very, very arbitrary ad hoc manner. Raitu Bandhu was not there earlier scheme. Dalit Bandhu was not there in the earlier budget. Suddenly, the chief minister makes, saying that, we are having Raitu Bandhu. And he makes a statement saying that, we are having, Dalit Bandhu. Dalit Bandhu. So it is very, very important the budget has to take care of this 93% of the population which is weaker. And then another industrial sector, they said, we are going to be strengthening in a big way. The budget nowhere, talks about, medium and small scale industry and the handloom sector, handloom industry. It has to talk about, how to strengthen. When you are talking about industrial development, does not mean, big industry. 80% of them. And majority of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, backward classes and the poorest of the poor are in the medium scale industry, small scale industry, handloom industry. Where is the allocation? Allocation. One of the major problems, allocation is different, release is different. And some of them have been saying, that any kind of a budget, when you are talking about, has to be released, in a at least, if not, every year, quarterly manner. Every quarter, budget has to be released. Then governance take place. Governance take place. And each ministry, each department will have, allocation of money. According to the information we have, it is arbitrary functioning. Every month, budget has to be released. Now, what kind of a planning goes on in the department in terms of education and health, which are the major sectors? If you release, budget, every month, what kind of a planning can be there? What kind of an equipment they can buy? What kind of infrastructure development, they can go about, bringing out. So when you look at, it is the figures are manipulated. There is no correlation between, what they are spending. The budget talks about, 3 lakh crores. And then, where are they going to be getting? They have only said, 70,000 crores, they will have to get it. Where are they going to be getting? That they do not give indication. And they are saying, somewhere, we will, sale of land. They are saying additional borrowings. The budget very clearly talks about, 40,000 crores, they are going to be getting additional borrowing. Already borrowings are very, very high. The Finance Commission report has said the Telangana government is blatantly violating RBI guidelines and Finance Commission recommendations in terms of borrowing. Already, Telangana state is in deep debt. Deep debt, 4 lakh crores is the debt we have. And they are saying, well, we are going to be having, additional borrowing. Let me specifically look at, when you talk about, as I've already highlighted, BC welfare, when you are talking about which is 52% of the population, the allocation is just about 2,000 crores. SC welfare, when you talk about, SC development, is just about 500 crores. 500 crores. Minority welfare, which is almost about 15% of the population, is 450 crores. Tribal population, which is about almost closer to 8% of the population, is only 260 crores. Arogyasri already about 2,000 crores are pending. 2,000 crores are pending already. As I've said about fee reimbursement, 4,000 crores is pending. Arogyasri is 2,000 crores pending. Allocation for Arogyasri is 1,101 crores. What about the pending? How are we going to be clearing it? That is why I am saying, there is the figures which are given, the reality is different. There are already pending bills there. And Arogyasri is just about that. And development of infrastructure facilities for universities. University allocation, as I have said. Several universities, have come up, new universities which do not have buildings, which do not have hostels, which don't have, basic infrastructure. And the allocation for development of infrastructure in universities is 500 universities. As I've said, there are 15 universities, out of which, many of them are small universities which have been just established about, a decade ago. Major recruitment has not taken place. Major infrastructure is not there. Scientific labs, science labs have not been established. Computer labs have not been established in these universities. Libraries have not been established. The budget just, talks about, 500 crores. And then, look at, for elimination of the left wing extremism, the allocation is 498 crores. Elimination of, the left wing extremism, such as, the Maoists and other kinds of problems. So much has been allocated. But then when you look at, in addition to left wing extremism, 9,599 crores have been earmarked for police and law and order department. 10,000 crores almost has been. Look at, the health budget. Look at the education budget. But then, when the police, 9,599 crores has been earmarked for law and order in the state budget, which is very, very high. Health is not important. Education is not important. Elimination of rural poverty is not important. Farmers have been committing suicide. After Maharashtra, the number of farmers which are committing suicide in Telangana is very, very high. Let me look at, specifically, because education is very important. As I've said, English language instruction has been launched. No allocation has been made, from grade 1 to grade 2. And then, number of residential schools, are there. 1,002 are there. The allocation is just about 5.59 lakh for students. Then, there are BC welfare hostels, SC welfare hostels, ST welfare hostels, residential schools to junior colleges. All of them, have got, just, 3,400 crores, which is totally inadequate. For me, education is very, very important. We need to provide. One of the major things, we thought, when Telangana comes, we will have better quality education. Let me look at briefly some other allocations now. Four. Yeah. Broadly, when we look at, in terms of budget, as we have been discussing about the expenditure of rupees 2.90 lakh crores is the budget. The budget does not talk about it, how are they going to get, the revenue from there? How did they arrive at that figure? And it does not talk about whether it's a surplus budget or a deficit budget. For the first time in the history of a budget, whether any state or central government or state government, this budget does not talk about whether it is a deficit budget or a surplus budget. If it is a deficit budget, how are they going to be mobilizing that deficit budget? How much they are going to be borrowing? And one of the major things they have been doing is selling land, etc. That is what they have been doing. Let me just briefly talk about other things which are. So the budget does not talk about what kind of a direction it has to take place, what kind of a growth which is going to be there in the rural sector. How are you going to be eliminating rural poverty? And the budget nowhere talks about what is the allocation which the centre is giving for major programs like Manrega. According to the information we have, Manrega is already, lot of money is pending. They have not been paid. Several issues which are of concern. So to sum it up, one of the major things which is important, the education is an important sector. Because the government talked about KG to PG free education. In Telangana, 25% of the population is below 25. They must go to good colleges and good universities. The allocation of infrastructure is totally inadequate, which they talked about 500 crores. We will not be in a position to provide quality education. And then when we look at the health sector, I've already discussed about it. That is not adequate. 4.18 is not adequate. And then when you talk about the major thing which they're talking about is Raitu Bandhu. 50% of the farmers in Telangana are agricultural labor. How are we going to be looking at this issue of agricultural labor? Are there any incentives for them? Are they giving any kind of a subsidy for them? Or how are you going to be encouraging them? Raitu Bandhu is only for people who have got land. 50% of the farmers in Telangana do not have land. And you talked about 3 acres of land, distribution of 3 acres of land. Where is that 3 acres of land? When 50% of the farmers are agricultural labor, they don't have Raitu Bandhu, they don't have Raitu Bima, they don't even have land. They're all farm labor, they're all agricultural labor. The budget doesn't talk about. 50% of the farmers are agricultural labor. Where do they go? They're desperate. Their living conditions are horrible and terrible. They don't come under any kind of a scheme of Raitu Bandhu or Raitu Bima because they don't have land. The government says, agricultural labor is not our concern. Is not our concern. So when you look at, ultimately the budget, is it going to improve, the life of the people? That is what, should be will their economic condition will improve? Will they have better social welfare? Will they go to better schools and colleges and universities? Will they have better health facilities? Will they eliminate rural poverty? Will they allocate more to Manrega scheme? Will they take care of the 50% of the farmers who do not have any land? Landless labor, agricultural labor. So the allocation has not reflected these concerns. Why was Telangana achieved? We thought poverty will be eliminated, unemployment problem will be solved. The government nowhere talks about, they said they will create 2 lakh jobs. They made promise in the assembly. What is the allocation? How are you going to be generating that kind of an employment? How are we going to be generating rural employment? How are we going to be strengthening small and medium scale industry? 80% of them, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, the backward classes and the minorities are in the small and medium scale industry. The budget talks about IT sector, information technology sector. That is not the only sector which is important. That's not the only industry which is important. Budget talks about we are encouraging private sector to come to India. But what about strengthening the existing public sector in India? Public institutions in India, public industry, people's handloom industry in India, which are there struggling. Handloom farmers are also have been committing suicide. The BD industry is one of the major industries in Telangana. What about their BD welfare of the BD labor? Does not talk about it. Does not talk about it. So, keeping the elections in mind, they have finalized this budget. Welfare is not a consideration. One of the major issues any budget should reflect is social welfare, social development, people's welfare, educational welfare, health facilities, health infrastructure. Health infrastructure, that is very, very important. It has not taken the profile of the people of Telangana into consideration. Somehow, because of the elections are coming, it's an election-oriented kind of a budget. It's not a people's-oriented budget. This budget is not going to improve in any way the social welfare, health conditions, elimination of poverty, reducing of poverty, infant mortality. Maternal mortality is taking place in a big way in Telangana. Infant mortality. People are dying before they celebrate first birthday. Maternal mortality is there. As I've said earlier, people who go and want to get a small surgery, family planning surgery, vasectomy or tubectomy, they are dying. They are dying. That is the condition. So, in that sense, the budget does not reflect. It's not a growth, they're talking about. Whose growth? Growth-oriented budget. Whose growth they're talking about? Development-oriented budget. Whose development-oriented budget? When we take, the people, look at, rural poverty. Look at, the conditions of tribals. Look at the conditions of the Dalits. Look at the conditions of the backward classes. Look at the conditions of the backward class women, scheduled caste women. Many of them not going to schools or colleges or universities. They said, every mandal, we will have a junior college and a college. Access is important. Access is not there to education. Forget about providing quality education. Access is not there to health care. Many of them go to primary health centers. These primary health centers have not been strengthened. The budget nowhere talks about how we are going to be strengthening rural hospitals, rural primary health centers. So in that sense, the budget only, it's fudging of figures, manipulation of figures. They have talked about 3 lakh crore budget. It does not talk about whether it is a deficit budget or a surplus budget. If it is a deficit budget, broadly it indicates it's a deficit budget, but they do not say it categorically it's a deficit budget. Where are you going to get the other allocation of about 70,000 crores to fill it? That is the major concern. Yeah, thank you very much.